Do you get lost without having proper documentation for things that you want to put together or that you want to understand? If you're like me, then this is a challenge. So taking the how-to video that I recently recorded specifically around, looking at code with an AI assistant and having that AI assistant be your mentor, one of the steps that we could take further here is to look at how the code is annotated. So I want to go back to VS Code real quick. Comments in the code, annotations in the code help other developers understand how certain things get built. And sometimes the comments are really solid. Sometimes they're kind of sparse, or they don't have a whole lot of detail or enough detail for another developer to be able to fix something if it ends up being broken in the code. So what I wanted to do is show how using this AI assistant, and by the way, this is my GitHub repository, and we are actually looking at this public repository specifically. You can see here, I've got a certain amount of detail in the repo itself. But one of the things I wanted to do is show you how you might be able to improve the documentation in the code itself so that a professional development team beyond that scale up point, coming off of one of those platforms, may be able to go in and start looking at what's already been built and figuring out how to build it even better. Notice I'm saying take what's been built and then make that better for scaling to a cloud platform like Azure, like Google Cloud, like AWS, Amazon Web Services. These are the things that can help a dev team be able to really dial in your particular application code and get it to be very high performing. Doesn't mean that there's not going to be defects. It doesn't mean that it at a certain point, things aren't going to need to be rewritten, but for the purposes of, making your application that has become wildly successful, be performant in the environment where you really start to make money, having it on a cloud platform is the way to go. And I'm saying this because I have come to the understanding that developing and deploying applications on cloud is a huge advantage to most startups and small businesses. Now, understand there's a whole cost structure behind that as far as cloud use is concerned. I am not an expert in this area. I do understand that it can get to be very expensive. So this is where you've got to be very careful about your go-to-market strategy. Again, I am not an expert in all of this. I understand this, having worked with companies in this space, and this is just knowledge I've gathered over the course of time. So the go-to-market strategy and the pricing, so that you don't run yourself into the ground as far as a business, that is a conversation that you need to have as you're going through the process of scaling up your application. Free is great. Freemium is even better, where you bring people on board with a certain set of capabilities for free initially, but then you start charging them that monthly subscription for the premium features. And we see this all the time with other applications out there. That's a whole different space, but I want to cast this vision for you for where you could take your application and start making even better money than you might be making now if you've already done this work in one of those other platforms that I mentioned in the previous video. So let's get into this. I want to basically say real quick, could you document the code with more detail so that a developer can understand what has been done? So now we're kicking off a process where it's actually going in And oh, look at this. So it is looking at a lot of this and adding, wow, okay. This is interesting. Now I want to check something here because this doesn't look, yeah, it's Python. Look at that. It's saying, hey, handler provides a centralized set of utilities for loading and validating and transform. Whoa, this is great. This is really great. I like this. Now, mind you, looking at this code, this is not documenting in code can get really verbose. There are many schools of thought about this. For somebody who is new to software development, having these explanations is probably really helpful, especially if you're a founder and you don't have a software development background, but you've got this wild idea and you built this app and you think it's going to be great in the marketplace and you're testing. Having this type of documentation in the code base can be very helpful, especially when you've got a professional team that you're onboarding to improve your application now that it's gone from the initial build platform out into the cloud. This is excellent. Wow. This is really cool. I like the way that this has been refactored to include more detail in the code base. Now, this is a great question. Would you like me to generate a short README section explaining how to integrate the auto handler into the larger voice cloning pipeline? You know, this is a valid question. And because we've asked in this particular Perplexity thread, we've asked the AI to act as a software development mentor. This is a very reasonable question for it to come back to us. So I'm going to go and say, yeah, please generate a README section. The developers. So let's see what it does. It's probably going to refactor again. And yeah, look at this. Okay, so this is interesting. I don't know, and I'm not going to assume that everybody's familiar with Markdown. This is Markdown text. This actually goes into, and let's flip back over here to VS Code. This goes into the code base as a file to describe a particular module. And where you add this into your code base is really a matter of preference. I like adding it, under modules. And of course, it'll have a snappy name like, audio handler. Okay, this is good. If I add this README file to this section of the modules, it'll be close to where the actual module is that's been developed. And that way, this Markdown will end up residing in the code base, and subsequently it will help inform the developers when they come in about some of the actual things that were built into the module. So they'll get the documentation in the code. In addition, they will get this README file, which is a summary or summation of how things were built. So this is really good. And again, this is Markdown text. So if you're not familiar with Markdown, hey, by the way, this is something that you probably should learn about, because this is a way of annotating and writing documentation specifically for the code base. It is just a tool. I'm not saying you don't do it a different way. It's just the way that professional software developers prefer to see things documented in their code. So, and now we're going to take a even further step. And what I want to do is generate a visual flow for this module. Now, Let's see what this comes up. And by the way, I am experimenting here. I have not done this in the past. So we're going to see what Perplexity comes up with as far as this visual flow. One of the things that I like, and I'm saying this because, I'm a visual guy myself. I like it when, oh, look at this. This is great. This is really great. Okay, so this is a process flow. And I do have a fair amount of things in my repo that, let's see, where am I? Where I generally, actually, I haven't built this one out substantially just yet. I'm going to flip back to one of my other repositories where I've got quite a bit more documentation just to show you how I prefer to see things documented. So quick start, environment setup. Okay, so this is a visual representation of all the files and the folders and everything that are associated with this repository. This is my model architecture overview. And again, let's blow this up. You can see here that there's a lot of detail as far as the information and where it flows. Sort of like this, but not. I like, I don't want to say I'm a documentation nerd, but I like seeing documentation. And here we go. This is the development workflow, my continuous integration and continuous deployment pipeline. And since I'm using this whole voice cloning project as kind of a step-by-step opportunity to document, the process for people to understand, yourself included, in my how-to series, this is a good compare and contrast moment between something that's a bit more advanced, this earlier multimodal or neural network project that I decided to take on and co-develop using GitHub Copilot and the agents inside, as well as using different large language models that are available in GitHub Copilot. This is a much more advanced version of where my cloning application, my voice cloning application, could be in the future. This is so detailed. And by the way, I was very focused on this because this potentially solves a business problem that one of my clients is looking at. So that's why this is a lot more detailed, because what I wanted to do is I wanted to present an option, a potential solution that the client could use. So this is a great thing to be able to go, this is a robust and well-documented code base that could be used for training, or I should say, building neural networks, multimodal neural networks, and then out of that would be a multimodal model. So in this particular case, a computer vision model as well as a text model. So this is one of those things where I put my understanding of professional software development, a lot of it I've gained working with my colleagues at Improving, but I put it to work to see what I could build. And this was over the Thanksgiving holiday break in 2025. So this is me now going back and saying, okay, let's do another phone application here. Let's build something else using a similar process so that people can see how this might be done. The most difficult piece of all of this, in my opinion, is just coming up with enough detail to enable the tools to get the work done. And for me, seeing all of this come out iteratively over the course of time is really a delight, because it just gives me such great joy to be able to show this to you as a viewer, because this is kind of the future of where software product development is evolving to. And I'm not saying that It's going to take away jobs for professional developers. In fact, the reason why I have tagged myself as an AI conductor on LinkedIn is because I am conducting tools that get software built. I am not necessarily writing the code by hand myself. I am just directing the agents on the work that I want them to do. In fact, one of the things that I have done is I've got a series called Product Development in a Nutshell that kind of steps through different aspects of product development that are applicable to human teams, to AI teams, and to hybrid teams, hybrid human AI teams. This is where we're going to end up in short order. Now, mind you, the platforms that are out there today are very chat-oriented and GUI-oriented, whereas I am looking at it from the other side of it, which is this is the nuts and bolts, hands-on kind of approach. So take it the way you want to take it. I'm looking at what could be a scaling challenge with some of these other platforms and going, okay, where do we make this handoff to a professional software development team? And how do we make that potentially as smooth as possible with the right types of documentation and annotation, all the things that people have become very used to when it comes to doing the good old-fashioned handwritten code that will continue to exist because AI is not going to be able to code things perfectly. It has no idea about how to do the type of problem solving that humans are great at. So we're always going to be in the loop, reviewing the code, asking particular questions about why one function was written a certain way versus another function, asking it to compare that and go, does this actually, or could this actually work? Challenging the AI as it's going through this process. Whole other set of, how-to videos in the future that I'm going to pull the transcript and I'll probably break all these concepts down into a little bit more detail. Suffices to say, in this particular how-to video, this was all about getting better documented and commented code, in addition to the added bonus of having a README file and a processing flow. So thanks for hanging on. I know this one was much longer than some of my previous how-to videos. I hope you enjoyed it. Another episode of Tim Unscripted How To.